What's going on? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy. The Colts have just made a couple of really interesting roster moves, and one that I think is going to really progress Anthony Richardson going forward. If you don't know me, my name is Elijah. I'm from Sports Talk Indy. We make videos daily about everything going on in the Colts news. We're still waiting on some more Colts news that are maybe like the anticipation's high. Colts Twitter was going nuts today. If you're not on there, be sure to like and follow all the guys on Colts Twitter. It was nuts. But the Colts made a couple of moves today that I think are going to be looked at long term down the road as some really good moves in the progression of their very young talent. Now, the move I want to talk to the most is the Colts have signed former Super Bowl MVP Joe Flacco. 3 years ago, if you had told me that, I would have been like, so what? Look at what happened last year. Joe Flacco, who I might add was the starter before Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson sat under him for a year. I don't know that he did anything for Lamar, but I would like to think that Lamar is where he is today, partially because of that year that he was able to sit behind Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco has talked multiple times about being a culture guy. He has always been there. He's always been a leader for his team. And I think that if Anthony Richardson's going to progress and go forward as the leader of the Indianapolis Colts, in this year, next year, whatever, I think that it's very important for a guy like Joe Flacco to be there to mentor. I think that helped last year having Gardner Minshew, who's still only 28 years old. But to be able to have a guy like Joe Flacco there is going to be huge. And also, Anthony Richardson has not been able to start, multiple games in a row because of injury. So I think it's important. I also think the Colts got him kind of at a steal. The Colts got him at an annual salary of $4.5 million guaranteed, with a potential $8.5 million with incentives. So if he plays a certain amount of time, throws a certain amount of touchdowns, Colts make the playoffs, so on and so forth. But I think this is a really good move for the Indianapolis Colts. I would also want to bring us back to 4 years ago when the Colts had one of the most legendary off seasons in history. The Colts at the time traded a third-round pick for Phillip Rivers, which was an incredible steal. That was at the beginning of the offseason. And then they also were able to trade a first-round pick for DeForest Buckner. In that same year, within a couple weeks of all of this happening, the Colts draft Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Julian Blackmon all in the same draft. And at the time, none of those guys were considered to be anything. They weren't considered to be all-stars. They weren't considered to be this big deal. But the Colts were able to make it into something. The Colts were able to look at these guys, and Ballard was able to see forward into these guys. I think that the Colts adding who they've added and not being super aggressive in free agency, aside from the pillars of a culture, I think that shows a lot of where the Colts are looking for in the draft and where the Colts are looking at on their guys they currently have. Last year, the Colts offensive line was leaps and bounds improved from the year before. The Colts at the end of last year were ranked bottom half in nearly every meaningful offensive line stat. This past year, they are ranked once again top 10 and in some categories top 5. They were able to progress a guy like Zach Moss to have a nearly 1,000-yard rushing season where he was on pace at the time before when Jonathan Taylor was still out. He was on pace for 2,000 yards at one moment. So you're talking about a well-improved offensive line, a wide receiver room that is now led by Michael Pittman on another 3-year deal, which is incredible. Josh Downs, who's coming off of a record-setting rookie season for the Indianapolis Colts, and Alec Pierce, who hopefully will be able to figure it out. But I'm still also looking for the Colts to potentially draft a wide receiver. The tight end room. The tight end room has Mo Alley-Cox, who I would be okay with them dropping. But we also get the return of Jelani Woods. And Jelani Woods was a freak on the field whenever he was there. I mean, it was absolutely incredible to see him go. So I like to see that. They have Anthony Richardson coming back, who is progressed to be not only the starter, but to be fully healthy in the next few weeks going forward. And we'll monitor that and post videos and stuff of that as it comes. But to see Anthony Richardson back, a tight end room that is healthy and not only healthy, but looks really good, a wide receiver room that looks much improved from the year before, and to be able to have Jonathan Taylor now backed by another roster signing of Trey Sermon, who at the end of last year was really, really good. At the last 3 games of last season, Trey Sermon in a running back 3 role had 161 yards and over 200 yards from scrimmage, so passing and rushing yards combined. That's a good for a running back 3. I think that's what you want. So Trey Sermon now gets the opportunity to be the running back 2, Trey Sermon is a much bigger guy. He's a former third-round pick, was picked by the San Francisco 49ers in the 2021 draft, if I remember correctly. So Trey Sermon comes in. So that's a much improved running back room. And I still am looking for them to sign another guy, or maybe there's been links to them drafting a guy out of Texas who they hosted for a top 40 visit. So all of that to say, let's bring it back to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco has 43,000 passing yards. He was an MVP. He was a Super Bowl winner and a Super Bowl MVP. This guy had an unbelievable career, and literally the only reason he was down was because it was a contract year. So he's obviously had some down luck. He was signed with the Jets and the Broncos and the Browns. And the Browns, he won 2023 Comeback Player of the Year. I think that Joe Flacco adds a lot to the Indianapolis Colts quarterback room in means of experience. The Colts right now are ranked as the youngest team on average in the NFL at like 25 years old, I think, if I remember correctly. So adding a guy who's 39 years old in 69 days is not going to hurt anything. And especially for a $4.5 million deal. Last year we signed Gardner Minshew to a $7 million, or it was a $7 or $14 million deal. And he just signed for a $26 million deal in Las Vegas, which is insane. I'm so happy for him. But that's crazy money for a guy who was backing up at the beginning of the season. So all of this to say, this is really exciting. I think the Colts are finally starting to figure out where they're going, and they're locking in these guys who are cultures or who are pioneers and pillars of a culture of success, a culture of guys being together as teams. And you got guys like Zaire Franklin, who has just like thrown himself into this leader of this defense role. Even you just watch him on social media, watch him on Twitter. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible to watch him recruiting, incredible to watch him be excited. He's not got a podcast with over 10,000 subscribers, which is just incredible. So all these things, I think the Colts offseason is showing a lot of reason for hope, even if they're not making a lot of big name moves just yet. I think that the draft is going to be really good for the Colts. And I think that the moves coming up in free agency, there's still a lot of guys left. Justin Simmons is still on the boards. Quandre Diggs is still on the board, and he's been linked with mutual interest to the Indianapolis Colts. L'Jarius Sneed is still that deal is still supposedly finalized, and yet still has some stuff to get through. So there's a lot going on with that deal. Go to Twitter and just search Colts news. You'll get caught up. It took, it was like 4 hours this morning. People were going nuts. But all that being said, the Colts are doing exactly what they said and what they plan to do this offseason. There's no shocks. They didn't have They didn't have a lot of meetings with free agents and then not get them. I think this is going exactly as they planned. And I think that going forward, this is going to be the recipe that they look at. This is going to be the year that we either remember as the greatest of Ballard's career, or it's going to be the one that ended up costing him everything. So hopefully it's the year that we remember as the greatest, and the Colts can really get progressed and going forward. And we get a healthy Anthony Richardson. And really, I mean, you go from 4 wins the year before to 9 wins this year. If you look at any other team that has a 5-win differential from the year before and the year current with that little of roster switching, I mean, there wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't a lot changing in the roster. And yet the Colts did something that was absolutely unheard of, which is increase from 4 wins to 9 wins. If you looked at that in any other team, that would be incredible. And yet some people, for some reason, still consider the Colts to be a declining team. I think it's the opposite. I think the Colts have a lot going for them going forward, and I'm really excited to see where they go coming this offseason and going forward.